Welcome to Hacksaw Shed and part 2 of making the brackets for this magnetic chuck to mount it on my shaper. Now, part 1 of the video went very well, part 2 not so well. Partly because I made some mistakes. I welded this bottom plate on in the wrong sequence on this side actually. So if you want to see how I got over that problem, stay tuned. The other thing was, this particular metal that I've made the brackets from, I'm really quite suspicious of it. It was supposed to be just bright mild steel, but it really didn't weld very well at all. I had quite a few problems with spatter and trying to get the run to go properly, freely, correctly. I actually switched back to my old AC welder at one point because I've discovered, because I've only just started DC arc welding, and I've discovered that they're subtly different and they react differently in slightly different situations. And my new welder here doesn't do AC arc welding. Anyway, I got through it, and in the end you wouldn't really know there was a problem ever. So, stay tuned, and then I finish off with actually using this to hold some metal to cut it on the shaper. And I have added in quite a bit of shaping because somebody did say, "Oh, can we see more shaping?" So I've put a bit more in this time. I hope you enjoy the video. I've marked those off at the same pitch as the T-slots. I centre drilled this first on my small model maker's drill because I can never get it accurate on this pillar drill with just a centre pop. It always runs off. Hopefully this will be fine. 10mm drill. Now, I just said a few minutes ago that I might drill these clamp plates but not slot them because that's just a bit too much trouble. But when I look at it, with my milling attachment, it might be quite easy to set up. So obviously I've taken this off already. This went pretty well. I had to file these a little bit because this hole moved off position a little bit when I drilled it, but you know, it works. I'm really pleased with that. So let's put the milling attachment on and see if we can do this easily. If it's not easy, I won't bother. I'll just leave it with holes in those plates. So when I made this, somebody remarked, I think quite rightly, this plate's too weak. I'm happy with this part because it's bracketed at the back and it's all very solid, but this could flap around. However, in using it, I've not experienced a problem. Now I could strengthen it if I need to, quite obviously, but I think at the minute I'm okay with it. So we'll put the top slide on here and I'll set up a plate and see if I can end mill it. There's the 10mm end mill, and see how it goes. If it's not too much trouble, I'll do it. I think you can see what's going on here. So top slide obviously, multi-fix, plate in the tool holder, line the hole up with the end mill, so I now know that it's correct in this direction and in this as well, but it's this one that matters. Lock up the cross slide, clamp that tight now. That goes into that hole. Okay, so bring that down. Hope you're following all this. And now I can set the lathe going, screw this up without screwing it up, and hopefully it'll cut that slot for me. I should really start with the middle hole here somewhere, but I don't know. I might just do that. I've just put some packing in under this plate. See if I can move it along okay. Yeah, that's going to work, I think. Just give me a second to get this right. Right, we're all set up again, but on the middle hole, because if I decide only to do one hole on each of these plates, the middle one is the one to do. Well, my rig was working okay. I had to put a clamp on it on this bottom plate, but otherwise it was fine. And I got a few cuts going okay, but then I found that the end mill has gone blunt. It's rounded off on the end. And it was only, one I got in a set, £12 for 5 or 6 end mills or something. So I think it's the end mill that's given up really. So this has proved to be a bit more trouble than it's really worth. I'll finish it off with a hacksaw and a file, and I'll just do the other one with a hacksaw and a file. I've finished them all with a hacksaw and then a file. It cost me a bit of quality, but I think it's alright for this. I recently got a new welder, and even for stick welding it's very different from my old AC transformer welder. So I've had a couple of practice goes on some scrap metal. I'll show you. That was 120 amps DC with a 3.2mm electrode. I only need enough weld strength to stop this table moving. So I'll probably just weld it, say here, in the middle and here. And I've clamped this plate down and these screws are clamped tight. Well, we've hit a problem here. When I bought this metal, the end was colour-coded pink. And when I checked that on my chart, it said free cutting. So I went back to the seller on eBay and said, look, are you sure this is just bright mild steel? Because I think it's free cutting. And he said, oh no, it's definitely bright mild steel, not free cutting. Well, I don't think that weld was too bad, do you? I'm not a great welder, but that's pretty reasonable. This stuff is spitting everywhere, and it's very difficult to get anything like a decent weld on it. So unfortunately, for all the work I've done, I will keep this, but the weld isn't going to be very good at all. Very annoying. So having made a bit of a mess of the first bracket, I've stopped work on that. I'll go back to that later. But for this second bracket, I'm going to go back to what I know and what I understand, I think. So to begin with, I'm going to use my old AC welder, which I understand well, and I'm going to weld in here, here and here to secure this plate, and then I'll do the fillet on the other side. And that should, I hope, if I balance the welds, keep this at 90 to this. Well, that's welded perfectly well with my old welder and my old rods. I'll do the fillet and see where that takes us, but then I need to understand what the difference is or what the problem is. So, old welder, old rods, decent weld, very little spatter, 2 places where I just had to go back over it for cosmetic reasons. Otherwise, that's fine. So what am I getting wrong? Different rods, DC welder. Could be either, but I don't understand. Spot the difference. DC welder, new rods, these ones. AC welder, old rods, these ones. So I'm going to have to grind this out now, try and do something with it. Somebody said to me in a comment very recently that the angle grinder is the welder's best friend. So let's try old AC welder, new rods, 6013 rods, 2.4mm. Going to weld at about 95 amps. So here we are, old AC welder, new rods, from there to there. Harder to keep the arc going and get the flow. The slag doesn't want to come off the weld, you've got to really sort of smash it off. So what I'm going to try now is my new Artec welder with the old rods and see what that looks like. So from here to here, DC welder, old rods, kind of welded okay, but very, very difficult to get the slag off. It does seem, my impression anyway, that using the AC welder, it was easier to get the slag off than when I was using the DC welder. So this bracket is more or less recovered now. Not as nice as I would have liked, but now I need to put them in the shaper and square them off, because obviously there's been a bit of distortion here. You can see how welding has warped those plates. No surprises, but it means I'm going to have to file out the fixing holes to fix those plates to the vise. I'm going to leave it at that. You can see how this plate is angled down, and I've created a lot of work for myself. On this side I tacked it here before I did the fillet. On this side I didn't, I just relied on the weight of the magnetic vise to hold it in place, and that didn't happen. But I'm hoping that when I put it all together and I clamp down on these, the nut would be at this side, it'll clamp it down, it'll bend it. It's only soft steel. And finally, with some adjustments to the holes for these screws, the magnetic vise is mounted on the shaper table. That's not going to move. I made quite a bit of work for myself with the odd mistake here and there, and clearly I'm going to have to spend some time with the new welder so that then I know whether or not the problem is with the metal, with the stick, with the welder. It's just too many changes at once. But I am suspicious about this metal. It might not have been free cutting, because I don't know if you could even get free cutting in flat bar like that. But I'm sure that the metal was giving me some problems with welding. So earlier you'll have seen that when I welded this onto this, particularly on this side, it kicked up like that, this piece, and then I machined on the underside, but at this end it kicked up too much really. I'd have had to have machined too much off. Now I thought I was going to be fine, but then when I clamped all of this onto the shaper table, I found the whole vise was kicking up like that to pull this flat onto the table. So a couple of options now. But this is what I'm trying at the moment, is to use the press and to press this lug down a bit. Bit of a long shot, but we'll try. Otherwise, I'm going to have to machine more off this. The other side is fine. This side is absolutely fine. You can probably see that this lug is a little bit lower than this one. Now when I release the press, it might spring back up, in which case I'll have to repeat. But if I can get this one down and the far side one down, it may be okay as it is, or I may have to remachine this surface. I don't know. We'll see. Right, well I think that one is now bent down enough. You can see that I've got this magnetic chuck on this plate at an angle, and it looks like, hey, that's another mistake. But it's not, because of the shaping of the deformity in this plate here. I only need to bend this corner down and not the whole thing. So I'm using this big thick block as a former, really. I'm trying to bend this down against this, and I've aligned it to where I know it needs to be bent. So we'll try this one now. There it goes, look. Now hopefully this won't fly out in my face. I do have protection specs on, safety glasses. Right, so I'll give it a bit more than I think it needs, because it's going to spring back. Right, we'll let that off now and see how much it springs back. Well, that looks about right to me. Keep going. Now the far one to do, this one over here. Okay, last one now. Just keep your fingers crossed. Oh, bit scary this. Oh, it's going. Well, it's been on and off a couple of times, and I'm finally happy that I've got each of those 3 lugs pressed down to where I need them. but I am going to have to remachine it. To machine it, I've simply reversed it. So it sticks up, I can clamp it here and here. I've clocked across because this back edge has been fully machined previously, and I'll remachine this bit here. Probably from about there to about there. It's a lot of work to correct a mistake, but that's the nature of mistakes, isn't it? That's fully cleaned up now. I took only a scrape off here and only a scrape off this back spine plate here. So I'm quite sure this is going to be okay now. Somebody did ask to see more shaping, so I hope you liked the more shaping. This is a side that I cleaned up, and because of the way I did it, I didn't have to adjust any of these holes because it doesn't sit any lower. So I think, we're there with that. And I've just one question left on my mind, and that is it worth, oops, stuck. Is it worth just machining this out around here a bit more to take the big key and let it go on further? And the answer to that question is not today. Maybe I'll put it on my odd jobs list, because the only way in which I could do this with my machines is to put it in the lathe, and then to swing this in the lathe I'd have to take the gap out. So I'll perhaps put it on my odd jobs list and add it to that sometime. So I guess the only thing left to do today is to set this up and try machining on it and see how well my workpiece stays on the vise. Here's the test setup then. It's a bit of a temporary rig just to do this demonstration, but we'll at least see if it works. When I posted part 1 of this video, Rusty Knox commented, "What will it be like when the chips stick to the magnet?" Well, the answer seems to be, for what I'm trying to do here, it's okay. This surface is a bit rough. That's not because of the chips, that's just because it was black bar and I've only just scraped the surface. I think overall, I'd say it was successful for what I'm trying to do. So I hope that was useful to you, if you've got to this point, and thank you for watching Hacksby Shed.